Ever heard of a man who went from a humble soldier to the emperor of almost all of Europe? A leader so brilliant yet so ambitious that his name still echoes through history over 200 years later? This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, the man they called the Little Corporal, whose legacy is a fascinating mix of genius, power, and ultimate downfall. Buckle up, because we're about to dive into one of the most epic tales in history. So who was this Napoleon? Picture this: late 18th century France, a time of revolution and chaos. Out of this turmoil steps a young, ambitious artillery officer from Corsica. He wasn't particularly tall or imposing, but what he lacked in height, he more than made up for with sheer intellect and unwavering courage on the battlefield. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. His rise was nothing short of meteoric. In an era where birthright often determined one's destiny, Napoleon proved that talent and determination could shatter any ceiling. He first made a name for himself at the siege of Toulon, where his clever use of artillery forced the British to retreat. Suddenly, everyone in the French military was talking about this brilliant young commander. His soldiers started calling him Le Petit Caporal, or the Little Corporal. Now, this wasn't an insult about his height. It was a term of endearment, a sign of respect. It meant he was one of them, a leader who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, who would stand with his men in the thick of the fight. He had this incredible charisma. He could inspire loyalty and bravery in his troops like no one else. They believed in him, and they would follow him anywhere. And follow him they did, all across Europe. Napoleon's mind for military strategy was revolutionary. He moved his armies with incredible speed, catching his enemies completely off guard. He was a master of using artillery and combined arms tactics, often facing armies much larger than his own and emerging victorious. Battles like Austerlitz, often called his masterpiece, showcased his genius. He tricked the opposing Austrian and Russian forces into a trap, securing a victory that solidified his reputation as an unbeatable general. From Italy to Egypt, the name Napoleon became synonymous with victory. With each win, his power and influence in France grew. The country, still reeling from the revolution, craved stability and strong leadership. Napoleon offered them both. In 1799, he seized political power in a coup d'etat, becoming first consul of France. But his ambition didn't stop there. He wasn't content with just being a leader. He wanted to be a legend. In 1804, in a moment of breathtaking audacity, Napoleon did something unprecedented. At his coronation in the Notre Dame Cathedral, he took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. Then, he crowned his wife Josephine as empress. The message was clear. His power came from himself, not from God or any other authority. Napoleon Bonaparte was now emperor of the French. As emperor, Napoleon wasn't just a warmonger. He was also a remarkable administrator and reformer. He set out to rebuild and modernize France. He centralized the government, reformed the banking system, and invested heavily in infrastructure like roads and canals. He improved the education system, creating a network of schools to train the nation's future leaders. Perhaps his most enduring legacy is the Napoleonic Code. This was a complete overhaul of France's legal system, replacing a confusing patchwork of old feudal laws with a single logical code. It guaranteed rights like religious freedom and equality before the law for all male citizens. It was so forward-thinking and effective that it was adopted by many other countries and still forms the basis of the legal systems in parts of Europe, Latin America, and even the state of Louisiana today. He was building an empire not just with swords, but with laws and ideas. But Napoleon's ambition was a fire that could never be quenched. He dreamed of a unified Europe under his control. His Grande Armée, a massive multinational force, marched across the continent, toppling old monarchies and redrawing the map of Europe. Spain, Italy, Germany, all fell under his influence. For a time, it seemed like nothing could stop him. He placed his relatives on the thrones of conquered nations, creating a Bonaparte dynasty. He was the master of Europe. However, every great empire has its breaking point, and Napoleon's was about to arrive. His relentless expansion created enemies everywhere. Great Britain, with its powerful navy, remained a constant thorn in his side. But his most catastrophic mistake, the decision that would seal his fate, came in 1812. He decided to invade Russia. He assembled the largest European army ever seen, over 600,000 men, and marched toward Moscow. The Russians, however, refused to engage in a decisive battle. Instead, they employed a scorched earth tactic, retreating deeper into the vast country and burning everything behind them, leaving no food or supplies for the invading army. Napoleon captured Moscow, only to find it deserted and set ablaze. With no supplies and the brutal Russian winter setting in, Napoleon was forced to retreat. That retreat was one of the greatest disasters in military history. His men faced starvation, frostbite, and constant attacks from Russian partisans. The Grande Armée was utterly destroyed. Of the more than 600,000 soldiers who invaded, fewer than 100,000 made it out. It was a devastating blow from which Napoleon would never truly recover. Seeing his weakness, the other European powers, Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, formed a coalition against him. They defeated him at the Battle of Leipzig in 1813, the Battle of Nations, and in 1814 they marched into Paris. Napoleon was forced to abdicate his throne and was exiled to the small island of Elba in the Mediterranean. Everyone thought the story was over, but Napoleon was not one to give up so easily. In less than a year, he escaped Elba, landed back in France, and rallied the people and the army to his side. The king who had replaced him fled, and for a period known as the 100 Days, Napoleon was emperor once more. The nations of Europe were stunned and horrified. They quickly assembled their armies again for one final confrontation. This led to the legendary Battle of Waterloo in 1815. It was a close-fought, brutal battle. For a moment, it seemed Napoleon might just pull off another miracle. But the combined forces of the British, led by the Duke of Wellington, and the Prussians under Gebhard von Blücher, were too much. Napoleon's army was defeated for the last time. This time, his enemies took no chances. Napoleon was exiled to the remote, windswept island of St. Helena in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles from anywhere. It was here, a prisoner of the British, that he spent the last 6 years of his life dictating his memoirs and reflecting on his incredible journey. He died in 1821. So, what is the legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte? It's complicated. Was he a hero who modernized France and spread revolutionary ideals across Europe? Or was he a tyrant whose endless ambition led to millions of deaths? The answer is, he was probably both. He was a product of his chaotic times, a military genius, a brilliant statesman, and an insatiably ambitious ruler. His actions forever changed the political and social landscape of Europe, paving the way for the rise of nationalism and the modern nations we know today. The story of the Little Corporal, who crowned himself emperor, is a timeless lesson in power, ambition, and the fine line between greatness and ruin. He rose higher than anyone could have imagined and fell just as dramatically. And that is why, 2 centuries later, we are still captivated by the life of Napoleon. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into history's most compelling figures. Let me know in the comments what you think of Napoleon. Hero or villain? See you in the next video.